Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and I am in New York. We've just found out that we are under lockdown for another couple weeks. Governor Cuomo has extended the shelter in place until May 15th. A lot of people have asked me why I'm still in New York, how it feels to be in New York. And I have to say, I can't imagine going anywhere else. I mean, I will say a lot of wealthy friends of mine who have second homes are all there, right? I mean, irrespective of where there is, the Hamptons or upstate or Florida or the Caribbean or wherever. People can do whatever decisions, they take whatever decisions they want. I get it. I was here during 9/11, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. It was a little scary, certainly seeing some of the fighter jets whiz by in the days and the hours right after, and smelling all the particulate matter, which included, of course, thousands of bodies coming off of the down towers, was heart-wrenching and very emotional. But being a part of it as well, and Ground Zero also felt kind of indispensable. As a New Yorker, I've been living here for well over 20 years. I can't imagine leaving that, and I can't imagine leaving it now. And particularly because now that I've been here for the last 4 or 5 weeks, as it starts to become a little bit less crazy, and as the numbers start improving, though it's hard to talk about hundreds of people dying a day from this disease in New York is improving, still a little bit less fear, a little bit less emotional exhaustion, and seeing a couple more cars on the streets, seeing more people getting comfortable wearing their masks outside, all that kind of thing. I think that's a good thing. The resilience of humanity, I think, is really important too, and we're going to get through this. I was certainly pleased to see that the Americans now have about the same per capita level test as in European Union. We're kind of in the middle. The Germans about twice as many, but the Brits and the French a lot fewer. And given that the United States is about, a week and a half, 2 weeks behind Europe in terms of the peak, that implies that we'll actually be a little bit better than Europe in per capita testing when we actually get to that point. So we were late, and really inexcusably late in surging on healthcare capacity, on testing, on masks, and the rest. But we also have surged, and the healthcare systems aren't getting overwhelmed. And I think we can all now see our way to the other side of this from the human cost in terms of the United States, and that's a good thing. So getting to the politics for a few minutes, right, at the end of this week. The big news has been to what extent the Americans are getting into a fight with the World Health Organization, with the Chinese for the original cover-up, the complicity. I certainly think that we don't want to be beating up on the World Health Organization right now. They are there to fight a pandemic. And, maybe Rumsfeld said it, right? I mean, about war. You don't fight a pandemic with the who you want. You fight a pandemic with the who you have. And this is the who we have. And are they as capable as I'd like? No. Do they have strong leadership that I'd like and independent? No. Overly bureaucratic, willing to defer to power, covering up for the Chinese, refusing to even talk to the Taiwanese because of that? All bad, right? But would I defund them right now when we really need their frontline capacity, especially on the ground in the poorest countries that don't have access to the healthcare and the doctors that we do here in New York City? Yes, we do absolutely need them. And the idea that Trump would be picking a fight with them and withholding funding in the middle of this pandemic is kind of unconscionable and will undermine American leadership with a lot of those countries. But then again, we don't really care about a lot of those countries. And that's true of Americans writ large. And it's obviously true of Trump, who's our president. And so, I mean, this is not a surprise. It's just disappointing. What's not also a surprise is that let's keep in mind that Trump has been on the back foot in terms of investigations and hearings for years now. From the Mueller investigations and the year plus of that to the impeachment proceedings and the months of that, all of the hearings have been against Trump. And he doesn't like that. And now, with the elections coming up, we're going to have hearings against the World Health Organization and hearings against China. And they're going to talk about how maybe, not only was there a cover-up, but maybe coronavirus came from a lab in Wuhan, not engineered, still would have come zoonotically from bats and pangolins, but they didn't have suitable security constraints, measures in this lab, and it escaped, and that's how it became the virus that we have now. Now, by the way, it is plausible that that happened. It's not inconceivable. There's no hard evidence, right? But the fact that that is a possibility and that it'll, of course, be out there on social media as a consequence is yet one more thing that can be used politically to divert attention away from the Trump administration and the ultimately 60,000 or more deaths that we'll see in the United States on the back of coronavirus, the 15 to 20% unemployment that we'll see on the back of coronavirus. And I absolutely understand why the politics of attacking the WHO and China in an election cycle is a valuable, even vital thing for President Trump to do. And we see this with the early campaign ads against Biden, calling him Beijing Biden. Again, same playbook. Is it a reasonable thing to do? Is it useful for the country? Is it useful for U.S.-China? Absolutely not. Is that the concern? No. If we weren't playing politics, both inside the United States as well as inside other democracies and inside China and globally, we could respond so much more effectively to this crisis. We would have fewer deaths on all of our hands. We would have less economic dislocation. But because the politics are maximally dysfunctional, in part because of a very divisive leadership in the U.S., in part because it's during an election cycle, in part because of the disenfranchisement and anti-establishment sentiments across both sides of the political spectrum in the U.S. and among most advanced industrial democracies and in most emerging market democracies, and because the Chinese have no trust for the Americans have no trust for the Chinese, and they don't want an American-led global system. They promote state capitalism and authoritarianism. And so with all of that, the political dysfunctionality in responding to the coronavirus crisis is massive. It's really unprecedented in my lifetime, and is going to cause a lot more hardship. So as we think about what the U.S. is and isn't doing economically, and how the Europeans are and are not able to function and respond economically, and all of the dislocations and all the people that are suffering so much more than I am and most of you watching this are, let's also keep in mind that we could be in such better shape if we could get the politics out of that. And it's hard to do, and I'm not expecting we're going to. I mean, again, the fact that we're in a GZERO world right now, I don't want to be in a GZERO world. I wish it never happened. But it wasn't me being an activist. It was just me being an analyst. And that's where I think we are. And people keep asking me, how do we get out of it? And my answer is, well, we're not going to get out of it in the near term. It's actually going to intensify because the inequality is going to intensify and mistrust is going to intensify. And the lack of interdependence between the U.S. and China in particularly is going to intensify. And so that does lead to much more political dysfunction domestically and globally. So I am deeply grateful that we are getting through this in terms of human cost of the virus directly in the United States and in Europe. I'm deeply grateful that the healthcare system isn't falling apart. I'm deeply grateful that I can live here in New York City and say that to all of you. But the economic impact, which is also real human impact that we're going to experience for a very long time, and not just here, but everywhere, is going to be a lot greater than people do assess right now, and we'll be watching that. So I hope everyone's been safe, sheltering at home, avoiding people, and I'll see you guys next week.